do trusts get taxed? Let me back up a little bit. When we say tax, what are we talking about? There's such confusion, and I don't know how many pages the Internal Revenue Code is, but I know it's pretty weighty and pretty complex. Let me try to break it down when we're talking about taxes. There's sales tax, you know that. There's excise tax when you sell your home. There's income tax. There's estate tax. So what kind of taxes are we talking about? Generally speaking, when we're talking about a trust, we are talking about what does the trust need to pay for income tax. All right, now to answer that question, we have to say, well, what kind of a trust is this? If you haven't guessed it, trusts and income tax are very complex areas. And just because you hear the term trust or tax, that tells you nothing. You need to ask more questions. So back to the income tax on a trust. If the trust is your revocable living trust, well, that is a disregarded entity from tax purposes. And what that means is any income from any assets in that trust are just gonna flow over to you on your personal tax return. And that's just fine. If on the other hand that this is not a revocable trust, if for example it's an irrevocable trust and that trust generates income, the tax rate on a trust and the trust income is very high. It's a very compressed tax rate. I might be off, but I believe it's $12,000. It hits the highest tax rate possible. If you're talking about an irrevocable trust and income tax, it's critically important that you work with a certified public accountant, CPA, to make sure that you lessen the tax burden. Tax burdens on irrevocable trusts are often mitigated by distributing out the income to the beneficiary, so the trust doesn't pay the tax, the beneficiary does. And I am not a CPA. Consult your CPA if you have an irrevocable trust for the best strategies. What if we're talking about estate taxes? Well, estate taxes are another big realm, big subject area about how do trusts impact estate taxes. Again, if it's a revocable living trust, it's a disregarded entity, doesn't have any impact on the estate taxes. It's just as if it's a person because it's your revocable living trust. What if it's a different kind of trust? And this is an area where I can't give any specific answers because it is way too complicated. Let me try to give you some insight into that. Let's say that on the death of one spouse, their will or their revocable living trust creates what we call a credit shelter bypass trust. What the heck is that? That is a trust that is set up that is irrevocable to receive the decedent's money, the deceased spouse's money, to make sure that they don't lose whatever estate tax credit exclusion exists for that person. If I've lost you, I am not surprised because this is what I'm trying to impart to let you know is that when you are talking about irrevocable trusts and estate taxes or irrevocable trusts and income taxes, it's very complicated and it's really important that you appreciate that, understand that, and then see either a CPA or some tax attorneys will also be able to assist you with that. Just don't expect that any estate planning lawyer is going to be giving you tax advice because oftentimes that is outside their area of expertise, as it is outside my area of expertise, and that's why I refer you to a tax attorney or CPA to give you guidance on these more complicated trust and tax issues.